Like I said earlier, we are jumping in here to our MLB Awards. Danny and I will hop into the editor's column, pro column, whatever you want to call it, and make our picks here as the MLB Award finalists, the three finalists, were released earlier in the week. Those results will come out the following week. I believe it's a day for each award, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th, maybe. But those will come in the weeks to come. We'll see how our predictions did, of course, when those come out. But we'll start here with the AL Cy Young. Three options here are Garrett Cole of the New York Yankees, Lance Lynn of the Chicago White Sox, and Robbie Ray of the Toronto Blue Jays. Danny, I'll start with you here first because I think I've got one that, is kind of typical, and from what I heard from you, it may not be maybe a sleeper pick, but what do you got for me?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Robbie Ray. I mean, 2.84 ERA, 7-3 or 13-7, sorry, mixed up the numbers a little bit. But he had a great season for the Blue Jays. He was kind of the driving force of that pitching staff for them. They had a great offense, couldn't make it to the playoffs, but I think Robbie Ray deserves it. He led MLB in strikeouts, which is a massive thing this year. There were so many strikeouts this year. So, yeah, I'm going with Robbie Ray.
It's it's hard for me to pick a Blue Jay for an award, especially after the very dangerous season that they had for threatening the Yankees' playoff hopes. With that said, I did a lot of thinking on this one. I believe I cut out any and all bias I could have had. I came very close to picking Lance Lynn and Robbie Ray, but I went with the Bronx guy himself in Garrett Cole of the New York Yankees. Little stats, obviously, of course. He was third in the league in Ks, so not exactly Robbie Ray there, but third in the league in strikeouts. He led the American League with 16 wins, which I think was a very under-the-radar 16 wins, especially after missing some time. Who knows, maybe he could have gotten the 20 mark if he didn't get COVID and every other issue that happened this year for the Yankees. With that said as well, speaking of issues, luckily for Cole's sake, the reason why I picked him is the playoffs do not matter. They don't count for any of these awards. It's strictly regular season, and he did not pull I don't really know who I could compare it to, but he didn't play like that in the regular season as much and as many times or at the severity of when the season was on the line. So that is not in any sort of effect here, luckily for my pick. One final stat to throw out here for Garrett Cole, a 5.93 K to walk ratio, which, of course, they record stats for everything in the MLB. I think pitching arguably is the most important that they record because you really can see sometimes how dominant a guy is on the mound. Every walk he gives up, there's 6 strikeouts there before it. Close to it, obviously. But so Cole, I really think if I want to pick one of those guys, 9 times out of 10, I would pick Cole to win one game. Of course, that one time happened against Boston this season. Don't need to dwell on that any more than I already have. But Garrett Cole is my pick for the AL Cy Young. And with that, transferring over now to the NL Cy Young Award, I'll start it off here now. The options are Corbin Burns of the Milwaukee Brewers, Max Scherzer of the Nationals and the Dodgers, and Zach Wheeler of the Philadelphia Phillies. This one was a little hard, I think, to pick. I think by name you look at Scherzer as being the dominant top dog, but also, I don't know. I think sometimes you give it to a guy who really kind of showed up and came out of nowhere and earned it. Corbin Burns is my guy. He was great in the shortened season of the MLB in 2020, but this year he really showed, yes, I'm a legit starter. He was fantastic. He was the ERA king, is how I put it. And to me, when you lead the league, there's so many, again, like I said, so many stats that get recorded. You could look to strikeouts as being the most important, look to the strikeout to walk ratio, look at the wins. But ERA, in my opinion, is the most important stat there because I look at the days of Felix Hernandez having a great ERA and never having a good record because he played with the Mariners, who were not a good team. But that being said, Burns was the ace of that staff, along with many other guys, Woodruff, Peralta there from Milwaukee, and he led them to the playoffs as their ace. That obviously, again, playoffs don't matter, but it was a great season from him. He led the MLB in strikeout rate as well, in Robbie Ray's face right there with your pick, but back in the AL. But strikeout rate of 35.6%, which I looked at and I couldn't determine how crazy is that. Is that very high? Is that very low? Chances are you see a batter and you strike him out 35% of the time. It's pretty good. So Corbin Burns is my pick there for the NL Cy Young Award winner.
Yeah, I'm going to back you on this one. Corbin Burns, 11-5 record on the year on a great team. He didn't get the strikeout king, but he had 4 less starts than Robbie Ray, which is something that was pretty big. I believe he was about 15 strikeouts behind Robbie Ray with 4 less starts. So, I mean, that's insane. He had a better ERA and more strikeouts per game than both Wheeler and Scherzer. I mean, I'm a San Francisco Giants fan, so I had to see Scherzer a lot in the second half of the year. So I was very, very tempted to go with Scherzer. He was great pickup by the Dodgers. But yeah, Corbin Burns, great year. .94 WHIP as well. WHIP is how often a guy gets on base.
Yep.
So he's averaging less than one man on base per inning pitched. To go with that absurd strikeout rate and the 2.43 ERA.
So, all right, we got one agreement here. We'll see how often that is. I think this next award is going to be almost a unanimous winner. I don't know if the MLB declares that, but knowing how much they love this guy this year, it seems like they easily could. Our AL MVP, I'll list him now. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani is my pick, but Shohei Ohtani of the Los Angeles Angels, Vladimir Guerrero of the Toronto Blue Jays, and Marcus Semien of the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, scary that Blue Jays had 2 guys up there. A lot of those guys just did it all this year. But you can't really beat Ohtani, I think, here, just because he's really proved to be, when you say all around in baseball, you usually think 5-tool. But this guy, I guess, is kind of 6-tool in the way he plays. He proved he was the best all-around player. He had a 9-2 record, 3.28 ERA. So the ERA obviously is still good, but not a top dog, but 9-2 record for the Angels, who are not a spectacular team by any means. And then you look at his hitting, which is just scary. 46 homers, 26 stolen bases, 100 RBIs, 103 runs. I guess, I'll let you talk a little bit more about him because I've been very, very tempted to pick Vladdy Guerrero Jr. as my MVP just because the way that guy mashes the ball. 48 home runs, 311 batting average. I would be more scared of him than Ohtani at the plate if I was a pitcher, just because I don't even know how to describe it. The way that Vlad kind of stares at you in the box and then has his multi-home run hit games with the Blue Jays. He'd lead the Blue Jays to those 12-run, 13-run games where they just looked like no one could beat him. That's where I'd want to give the edge to Vlad, but the greatness of Ohtani and the things he's done that really have never been done before. You could compare him to Babe Ruth, but Babe didn't do it. You have to give it to Shohei.
They're going to have to figure out how to make this not Shohei Ohtani's award for the rest of his career.
Right.
Because if you're able to do what he does both on the mound and at the plate, I mean, you're just the MVP every single year. When you go 9-2 and also hit 46 home runs with 100 RBIs, it's absurd to me. The dude is so good at baseball. Also, another stat to bring out, he led the MLB in its entirety in WAR and was tied for first with 8 triples this year. So not only does the dude hit 46 home runs, but he gets 8 triples, which is tied for a major league best. He's so good. He throws 100+ miles per hour and hits 500-foot home runs. I mean, I don't know how you don't love this guy if you're an MLB fan, and I don't know how he would not be the MVP of this season in the AL.
I don't know how we couldn't be in consensus on that one. I think it's going to be very, maybe correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think it's going to get a little boring hearing so much about Shohei Ohtani in the future. I'm the name Shohei, obviously, like Showtime, whatever you want to call it, but I make it a little bored of it, but for now, you got to just bask it in all its glory, and as he should, rightfully so. NL MVP now, we've got 3 guys. I will mention this, actually, because this was arguably the most interesting aspect of all of this discussion. Of the 6 MVP finalists, 3 in each league, of course, none of those 6 players made the playoffs. So again, shows playoffs don't matter, but who knows? Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. I won't be the judge of that. Everyone can debate that on their own. But for the NL MVP awards, we have Bryce Harper from the Philadelphia Phillies, Fernando Tatis Jr. of the San Diego Padres, and Juan Soto of the Washington Nationals. This one, I think, was arguably the closest race that we've had. I think it really could go either way, or I guess any way with the 3 of them. But I'm picking Bryce Harper just because of how hot he was towards the end, how just short the Phillies came when they made that push. That's almost why I picked Zach Wheeler for my NL Cy Young as well. Same reasoning. But he led the majors in slugging percentage, and he had a 309 batting average. You bat above 300. There were not as many guys who bat above 300 as usual this year, I noticed. So for Harper to be able to do that, fantastic. And he had 19 home runs in his last 58 games. So he was on a tear, and also Harper he has some familiarity with this MVP talk. He won in 2015, and he's the only player on this board to win an MVP. So Bryce is my pick. I did want to throw, though, and I'm not sure who your pick is here, but I did want to throw Fernando Tatis's name in. I wanted to give it to him, but I can't because of two reasons. His fielding to me as a pro sometimes is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, or the ugliest thing. I would want to give it to him based on his hitting. 42 home runs. He led the NL in homers as well as stolen bases. That's scary. That's just, I don't know how you can really compete with that or really keep him off the base paths in any way, whether he hits it out or takes him from you. But he played 130 games. He missed 32 games in a season. My question would be, how many more would he hit if he played? If he played those 30 games, I could see myself giving him the pick, especially if the Padres might have made the playoffs. But who knows? So because he didn't play enough, Juan Soto you could throw in the mix as well, but I just don't really think the Nationals were legit enough for me to want to give him an MVP. So Bryce Harper's my pick.
Yeah, I agree. I've started to get pretty familiar with Tatis, and he is a great player, but like you said, missing some games this year. I'm also going to go with Harper. I mean, he was so good down the stretch. He was so close to leading the Phillies into the playoffs. And who knows? I mean, the NL East won it. Maybe if Bryce Harper and the Phillies get in, they end up being the World Series champions. But yeah, 35 home runs on the year. Led the MLB in OPS. Tied for first in doubles. 429 on-base percentage. Was second only behind Juan Soto. The dude had a great year. I think Soto may have had a slightly better offensive year, but I mean, the Nationals blew everything up on the deadline. They were not in contention for anything. I think the MVP needs to go to a guy that played on a semi-decent team that also had a great year, so that's why I'm going with Harper. I think maybe the best player in the National League this year was Juan Soto, but I think Harper is your MVP.
Yeah, I think Soto does go under the radar because of that, but who knows, maybe it's rightfully so that he goes under the radar because his team was one of the worst in the league this year. But anyway, we'll move on here to our managers of the year, which I think is always more interesting than people give it credit for. In the AL, we'll start there. We have the Astros, Dusty Baker, Tampa Bay Rays, Kevin Cash, and the Seattle Mariners, Scott Servais, who is my pick, that final guy. For the Mariners to come so close, I almost wanted to see them somehow get it, as long as it meant the Yankees didn't get out of the playoff picture. But the Mariners haven't been in the playoffs since, I believe, the year we were born, which is now getting to be over 20 years at this point. So it's very long overdue, and that team was not as good as I think their record showed, which is very rare to say. I think usually it's the other way around. But they won, I think it was 90 games on the season, and came just short. And I really, you got to give credit to the leadership behind that, because Mariners had a couple leaders, like a guy like Kyle Seager, but also a lot of young guys who really stepped up and filled roles. And it was really cool to see a team who, again, small market, hasn't made the playoffs, even all those years with Ichiro, which is crazy to think, but hasn't made the playoffs in 20 years. It would have been cool to see them get in, but I think the fact that they were in it until the last day of the regular season was remarkable. So that's why I want to give them the pick, or him the pick, excuse me.
That is the only reason why I can't go with him, because he didn't make the playoffs.
All right.
So I'm gonna go with the guy that led the best team in the AL, Kevin Cash. They go out when, I believe, 106 wins?
Yeah, they got over 100.
They were definitely over 100 wins.
I know, because the Yankees gave it to him.
He's a great manager. The Rays have been in contention every single year. I think it'd be hard not to pick him in my case, because I know who I'm going with in the NL. I think it's pretty obvious with my fandom and how good they were this year. But yeah, Kevin Cash, AL. The analytics, I mean, you can talk about maybe they should have won the World Series last year, but this year they were, I think, a little bit better with that. He's brought them over 100 wins, like I already said, but when you win over 100 games, it's hard for me not to go, yeah, that guy kind of deserves it.
Well, you basically alluded to your pick in Gabe Kapler of the NL manager for the San Francisco Giants. Spectacular with over 100 wins, easily. Best record in the NL. Almost beat the Dodgers to keep going. But just for the sake of argument, I'm going to go with, I don't know. Maybe I don't want to go with him. Actually, I think I have to give it to Kapler. I have to. I wanted to change my pick, but I couldn't. Gabe Kapler is my NL manager of the year. He led a team that people thought was going to get 60 to 70 wins. Double that almost. So it's ridiculous that they were so good with really, I don't think the Giants were that talented of a team. But that's all I'll say there. I'll let you get your little spiel in here with your Giants to talk highly of them for a second.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I watched a lot of Gabe Kapler and his managing style this year, and when I wasn't watching, I was listening to the radio while I was working, but they were projected, I believe it was 77 wins this year. I ended up winning 107, 30 more games than they were projected. I was not sold on Gabe Kapler or analytics before he got to San Francisco, but this team was not supposed to be this good, and they end up being the best team in baseball. I don't know how you can win 30 more projected games than you, or win 30 more than you were projected. But Gabe Kapler brought us to where we needed to be, and I mean, I'm hoping that he'll win another Manager of the Year next year and a World Series for me.
It would be extremely interesting to see that happen, especially with Buster Posey retiring. But, you know, these awards, obviously all three members of each grouping or finalists are rightfully so deserved. It could go any way. We'll see. Maybe we keep track who was right, who was wrong. We got a couple agreements here and there.